Hey guys, and welcome to the first episode of my Portuguese for Beginners tutorial. Sejam muito bem-vindos. My name is Andrew, and this series is designed to teach you Portuguese completely from scratch. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about what you should know and expect as you begin on this journey that could possibly change your life. The Portuguese language is like a key that allows you to unlock the doors to a fascinating world. It allows you to access so much amazing music, movies, literature, culture, and knowledge. Not to mention all the cool places that you'd be able to experience more fully. But to me, the best part is all the people that you connect with along the way. And being one of the most widely spoken languages in the world, it's a lot of people. In this series, the focus will be on learning Portuguese as it's spoken in Brazil. Now, you might be wondering, oh, but if I learn Brazilian Portuguese and I go to Portugal, will I still be able to get around? Will people even understand me? So, just to be clear, there are significant differences between Brazilian and European Portuguese, probably more so than American and British English. So, the standard written language is pretty uniform throughout the Portuguese speaking world. But where you do see a lot of the differences are in the pronunciation and grammar of the spoken language.
Dizendo que se você jogasse pela seleção brasileira, a gente teria 5 títulos mais.
Por isso estou muito feliz. Não trocava a minha nacionalidade por nenhuma.
That said, if you learn Brazilian Portuguese well, you will absolutely be understood in Portugal. Portuguese people are generally so used to hearing it because of all the Brazilian movies, TV shows, music, and YouTubers that they're exposed to. And also because there are a lot of Brazilians in Portugal. Now, how well you understand them might be a little hard at first if you haven't had much exposure to how they speak. But ultimately, they're just two varieties of the same language. And for the most part, you should be able to get by just fine in Portugal speaking Brazilian Portuguese. One thing you should know about the linguistic situation in Brazil is that the spoken language has diverged pretty significantly from the written form. During the colonial period, which was from the 16th to 19th century, the Portuguese language coexisted and came into contact with a lot of indigenous and African languages. The vast majority of the Brazilian population during this time was either of indigenous, African, or mixed race origin, most of whom were enslaved and or illiterate. And so this inevitably led to some simplifications in the grammar of the spoken language. This is important to highlight because the type of Portuguese you find in courses out there tends to be heavily slanted towards the standard language that you find in newspaper articles, which isn't the most accurate representation of how it's actually spoken in the real world. And so this can be a problem if your primary objective is learning the casual, everyday Portuguese that you hear your Brazilian friends speak, that you hear in TV shows, in music, which is why in this series, I'll be focusing on the colloquial language and how it differs from standard Portuguese. And I'll be using video clips, tweets, Instagram posts, YouTube comments to really bring the language to life and expose you to native content right from the get-go. One of the biggest challenges that you'll have in learning Portuguese as an English speaker is getting down the sounds of the language, especially the nasal sounds, as well as the open and closed vowels. So Portuguese has a lot of these funky nasal sounds like mãe, irmão, situações. These are the sounds that Portuguese learners tend to have the most trouble with. And it's usually one of the main ways that Brazilians are able to tell someone isn't a native speaker. The other one was distinguishing between open and closed vowels, as in avô, grandfather, which is pronounced with a closed O, and avó, grandmother, which is pronounced with an open O. Now, I'll have an entire lesson explaining open and closed vowels in more detail, but just to give you an idea as to how mixing up these sounds can completely change the meaning of the word. Related to the topic of pronunciation, you'll find that in Brazil, there are a ton of accents. Now, as a Portuguese learner, you'll likely be exposed most to the Rio and São Paulo accents, since they're by far the most dominant in the media. Those two cities are pretty much where all the major TV networks are. So The closest thing you'll get to a so-called standard accent is what you hear from news reporters.
E mandados de busca e apreensão contra 8 empresários.
It's sort of a middle ground between the two. I'd say it slants a little bit more towards Sao Paulo. It's kind of become the de facto standard in the mass media. It's what you tend to hear on the news, dubbed movies and TV shows,
É correr ou morrer.
in audiobooks.
Era esbelta e vibrante, com as pernas tonificadas de uma corredora.
And so this is more or less the type of pronunciation that we'll be learning in this series. Just like in the other Romance languages, the verb structure in Portuguese is a lot more complex than it is in English. If you take a look at a Portuguese verb chart, it can be pretty intimidating thinking you have to learn all those conjugations for just one verb. But the good news is that for the spoken language, a lot of them you don't need to know. A lot of those forms are really only used in the written language. And so those are something that you can pick up way later on. So most verbs in Portuguese are going to fall under one of three buckets. Ones that end in AR, like falar, to speak, ER, as in comer, to eat, and IR, as in decidir, to decide. These are the regular verbs, and each one of these groups are going to follow the same conjugation patterns depending on their ending. Now, there's a smaller set of irregular verbs that each have their own unique conjugations. And so for those, you'll just have to memorize. For conversational Portuguese, there are about 15 of these that you'll want to know cold. And then there's another category of verbs that are semi-irregular. These are basically regular verbs, but have irregularities in certain forms. And there are about 20 or so of these that you'll really need for everyday speech. So how this Portuguese for Beginners series is going to work is, the first 3 videos are going to be focused solely on pronunciation and ear training. This is the most important part of the process. But we're not going to learn it in the typical way where you break down the entire alphabet and learn a bunch of rules. It's basically going to be simple listen and repeat exercises, but done in a way that teaches you to use your intuition to figure out the pronunciation patterns. From there, we'll focus on learning the real spoken language using real life content like interview clips and social media posts. But I'm glad you're joining me on this journey, and I can't wait to see you in the next lesson. Obrigado.